purposes, or prophecy does seem to be unfolding. So let's go back to the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki in one side is referred, people look at the Anunnaki as the planets and the constellations and these battles that were taking place in the heavens, because you can link Enki to Neptune. You can link Inanna to Venus. You can link Sin to the moon. Actually, there's a god named Sin in ancient Sumer, Sin, which is the moon, which is quite interesting because the definition of sin is absence of light. And then the moon is the opposite of the sun. And if you have, you and I experienced the full solar eclipse together, which is a beautiful experience we had. And that, to see how the universe works so beautifully, how could there not be intelligent design? How could there not?
Yeah, there has to be. Right. Exactly.
Something took place on Mars. And that's where I believe we originated from, or at least part of our DNA, because we also have DNA from this earth. We have DNA from this planet, but something makes us different. And if you read these tablets about how we were created in the image of the gods, or of God, plural or singularity, you can, there's two different texts that describe, there's one that'll describe God singular, and then there's text that describe God plural. So once again, I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying, if you read these tablets, it does say that we were created in the image of God. And then we're perfect. We're in the garden, we're in the Garden of Eden, and then we get tricked, or Eve gets tricked and Adam gets tricked into eating from the tree of good and evil. But did they really eat an apple from a tree, or did something happen to their DNA? Did something happen to their consciousness to change that purity? And then now we're in this constant battle of good and evil. But let's go back to when the Anunnaki were on Mars. This is the electric universe hypothesis of when Saturn was much larger, titled Shamash, and it was actually a star. Now, this is a whole other ballgame here, folks. Look at this configuration right here. You can see Venus, you can see Mars, and you can also see Saturn. Saturn, call it Shamash, is the star. So thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, when we were colonized on Mars, and here is Cydonia on Mars, here's the face on Mars. This was taken from the 1976 Viking orbiter, and they spent decades trying to debunk its sense, but you can clearly see this is a face. It looks like a face in Egypt, like a pharaoh face. It's got the headdress around him. And there's also many pyramids next to this face that go down to the left, the five-sided pyramid, etc. Years later, NASA tried to show more footage of this, saying, well, it was just pareidolia. It was just a reflection of the shadowing. It's absolutely not. This is a face on Mars. This is a civilization on Mars. And what happened is Jupiter and Saturn, they started getting closer and closer together. Venus, so Saturn is Shamash. Saturn is a star. Venus ejects out of Saturn as Shamash, ejects out of Shamash, launches out. Venus flies out. You've read about Medusa. You've read these mythologies about the Medusa. Once you look at Medusa, you turn to stone. Medusa is referenced to Venus. When Venus flies out of Saturn, causes major chaos. All the orbits on the planets mix up. And you've heard the story about Nibiru. Well, there's a very strong possibility Nibiru was actually Mars, the planet of war. Marduk, the king of Nibiru, Mars. Do we see a similarity here? Now, once again, let's go back to the face on Mars. There's a major catastrophic event that happens on Mars. And if you want to see proof of that, let's go take a look at Valles Marineris. This is a canyon that's like 20 times the size of the Grand Canyon. It's 2,500 miles across.
Wow.
It's deeper than Mount Everest. Something completely obliterated Mars. Now, there's ancient stories that it was a nuclear war. A nuclear war did not do this. What happened here is, I'll show you right here. I'll show you exactly what happened. Lichtenberg. You heard of Lichtenberg figures? This stuff right here? Lightning bolts. It's the
What's that?
thunderbolt. Yeah, this is the thunderbolt of the gods. When Shamash went supernova because it's battling with its brother Jupiter. Jupiter's the king of the gods. Remember, according mythology here, not capital
Yeah,
G.
right,
But you talk
right.
about Greek and Roman. Jupiter's the biggest planet, right? Jupiter,
Right.
Zeus. Zeus is battling it out with Kronos. Kronos gives birth to Zeus. Then Zeus battles Kronos. Kronos is Saturn. Saturn, if you go back even before that, was Shamash. It was a star. We were in polar configuration. It goes crazy. Venus launches out. Our ancestors are looking at all this stuff on Earth, going, "What the heck is going on?" And then on Mars, what the heck is going on? They had to leave that planet. They left that planet. They came to Earth. And if you read Cairo in Egypt, the official name is Al-Qaira, which means place or camp of Mars.
Wow. So
They-
you're saying so you're saying the Egyptians would look up into the heavens and they seen this celestial explosions
Yes.
and meteorites crashing, or maybe huge comets or something.
Yes.
And they began to that's how some of their names were developed. And then later on, mythology and different things were brought forward.
Right. And here's another very interesting thing is the Jewish tradition, there's a lot of connections with Saturn and with Venus. And the
Yep.
Jewish tradition typically worships on Friday and Saturday, right?
All right.
Saturn Day. Friday is connected to Venus. And then if you read a lot of these old stories of the mythology of the battles in the heavens between, or the love and hate stories between Inanna and Dumazid, the shepherd, they're referring to Venus and Mars. Venus and Mars. So our ancestors would see these battles take place in the heavens, and they would attempt to mimic them here on Earth. And you look at a lot of the archaeology, Göbekli Tepe, and a lot of these megaliths that we're still discovering, and they are they're built along the ley lines, and they're built along the orbits of the moon and the planets and the constellations, and they would link up to these stars and these constellations because to them, that was their knowledge base, to our ancestors, right? That was like their college, their university, and they were able to connect. Like, think about looking out there, but you're really looking in here, right? Some people hear the term "as above, so below," and they think that that's like evil or demonic. And if that's what you want to think, that's fine, because it might be in certain people's minds. I get it. But as above, so below to me means you see something in the heavens and, it's like mimicking it here on a lower level. So it's like how do I put it? An archetype.
It's like you see something in the heavens and then you're constructing something on Earth to mirror it.
Look, you wouldn't be here without milk. You may not have depended on it as a baby, but one of your ancestors did. And also, even now, many of us continue to indulge in cheese, ice cream, and all of the good things that dairy gives us as adults. But we're not the only animals that drink milk, and we're not the only animals that produce milk, because guess what? You are a mammal. The only thing that's weird about us is that we don't exclusively drink the milk of our own species. But why do we rely so heavily on milk? And why do we favor the milk of cows and goats, for example, over other animals? Well, some of the alternatives are pretty extreme. Let me give you a taste. If you've had a cup of coffee with cream lately, or maybe cereal with milk, you've come to the right place. Because while you may not have thought of it then, milk is weird. Well, the liquid itself isn't that weird. It's super useful, but the way we use it, that's weird. I mean, milk is for babies. That's why it was made. Plenty of adult humans, though, drink it anyway, like myself. And the milk we drink mostly comes from cows, but there are lots of other options out there, including the fattiest and skimmest milks known. You just probably wouldn't want to drink them. Milk is produced by modified sweat glands in mammals called mammary glands, and it's used to give baby animals the nutrients they need before they can digest other food. All mammals produce milk. It's where we get the name mammalia, and it's one of the 3 defining features of mammals, along with hair and 3 middle ear bones. Humans, being mammals, also make and drink milk. But we have done something no other animal has. We've taken this nutrient-rich baby food and, through genetic mutation, turned it into a digestible dietary staple for humans of all ages. But most people don't continue to drink human milk throughout their lives. If they did, it would mean a human would have had to sacrifice the calories necessary to make the milk, which would have totally defeated the purpose back when we were starting to use it as an extra source of nutrients. So instead, we drink the milk of other animals. People around the world drink milk and make other food products from animals like yak, reindeer, water buffalo, elk, and horses. In the US and Europe, dairy consumption is mostly limited to the mammary secretions of sheep, goats, and cows, but really mostly cows. Why? Well, first, picture a cow. They're big and they're pretty nice. Over generations of selective breeding, we've created creatures who can give between 6 and 7 gallons of milk a day, and they're domesticated enough to just line up to do it. Goats and sheep, while they've also been bred to produce more milk and be more willing to do so, can only produce about a gallon of milk a day. By economics alone, cows are the better milk producers. But it's also a matter of taste. Cow's milk has a fat content similar to human milk, about 3.5% versus a human's 4.5%, which makes it familiar, at least if you want to drink whole milk. By comparison, the water buffalo, which produces the milk that gives the world buffalo mozzarella, has a fat content of almost 7%. Great for cheese, but maybe not the best for drinking. These animal milks all have different fat content because it depends on the animal's environment and the way that they nurse. If you're looking for the very fattiest known milk, you'll have to find a hooded seal. Their milk is about 60% fat. That's because hooded seal pups are born on floating sea ice in the North Atlantic and Arctic oceans. The harsh temperatures and the instability of the environment mean that the pups have to put on a lot of fat really fast. They only nurse for about 4 days, but almost double their weight in that time. By comparison, heavy cream is usually around 36% fat. Even if you wanted to hang out in the freezing, icy ocean, drinking this stuff would be like trying to drink really fatty peanut butter. At the opposite extreme, the skimmest known milk comes from the black rhinoceros, with a fat content of around 0.2%. The watery milk probably has to do with their long nursing period. Black rhino moms nurse their young for almost 2 years, and pouring a ton of fat into their milk for that long would use up a lot of resources. But if you wanted to try some out, you might have some trouble tracking it down. For one thing, black rhinos are critically endangered, so it would be tough to find one in the first place. And even if you did find one, it's still a rhinoceros. Have you seen one of those things? About 1/3 of the females and half of the males die from fights with other animals. Unless you're a baby rhinoceros, a nursing rhino mom is probably not gonna let you walk up and take a swig. Now, before we sign off, I want to clear up one milky myth that gets repeated a lot. Hippopotamuses are mammals, and they make milk. You may have heard that it is pink, but it is not. Hippo milk is whitish, just like all other milk. This misconception probably comes from the fact that hippos do secrete a super useful mucus on their skin that helps protect against UV rays and works as an antibiotic, and the mucus is a reddish color. But it is not milk. Though again, you probably wouldn't want to go up to a hippo and check. But okay, knowing that there's so many other animals that make milk, and even knowing that some of it isn't exactly appetizing, I still want to know, does it all taste the same? If I had to pick one to try, I probably would try polar bear milk, just so that I could have the story. But alas, I will probably never get the chance to taste polar bear milk, so we will have to settle for Stefan's explanation of what it would taste like if we could drink it.
Science is all about asking important questions, like what does polar bear milk taste like? And the best way to find that out is to taste it. So that's exactly what polar bear scientist Andrew DeRocher did. Turns out it's got a creamy texture, and it's a bit chalky, salty, and even fishy. And that reveals a lot about its composition, which gives researchers like DeRocher insights into the lives of polar bears. Milk production is one of the defining features of mammals. That means all mammals, from platypuses to humans, make some variety of the stuff. Each species' milk is tuned to the unique needs of their babies, so the composition and the resulting taste can tell us a lot about that species. Of course, getting milk from a mother polar bear is no easy task, but intrepid researchers like DeRocher have actually collected samples and even tried them, just for good measure. Polar bear milk is pretty fishy tasting because it has a lot of fishy smelling oils, which come from the seal blubber mom is eating. And it's also salty or chalky because it has a lot of minerals in it, including sodium. Saltiness is a common feature of marine mammal milks because sodium binds with other chemical compounds to help the cub absorb the fat and fat-soluble vitamins in the milk. And boy, is there a lot of fat. That's why it's so creamy. Analyses show that when the cubs are young, fat makes up about 40% of the mama bear's milk, while another 11% is protein. Those hefty levels of fat and protein allow the cubs to drink relatively small amounts per day. A 50-kilogram, 8-month-old cub only downs about 470 grams a day. When our babies are that age, they're only about 9 kilograms, yet they'll drink around 750 grams a day. But human milk is much less rich. It has only a tenth of the fat of polar bear milk and a sixth of the protein. So it's much less creamy, but it's a lot sweeter because it contains about 7 times as much lactose or milk sugar, which helps nurture the right intestinal microbes and boost the baby's immune system. While human milk isn't quite as fatty as polar bear milk, it is fattier than cow's milk. That's because both human babies and polar bear cubs are born underdeveloped and helpless, or altricial, so they need a certain amount of fat and nutrients to finish their development outside the womb. The quicker that happens for the bears, the better, because that means less time when the young are vulnerable to predators or rivals. Our species has family groups and tools to keep the baby safe. Polar bear mamas don't, so they fast-track their cubs' development by feeding them the bear version of half and half. The fact that mama bears produce such fatty milk is even more impressive when you realize that they produce it while starving. In an extreme effort to keep their cubs safe, these moms hunker down with them in an underground snow den for 4 to 6 months. During that time, the family never leaves, and mom has to slowly use up her own fat reserves to make the milk. And because those reserves are eventually limited, the milk actually changes flavor and becomes less creamy over time. In addition to helping the cubs grow nice and rotund, that fat is also there as biological fuel. As you can imagine, it's not exactly tropical inside of a snow den. Cubs are born almost totally hairless, so they need a way to keep warm in those freezing temperatures. A high metabolic rate allows their bodies to act like mini furnaces and generate heat by burning some of the milk's fat until they grow enough fur and fat to weather the cold. A lot of protein could also provide the needed caloric fuel, but it turns out protein is kind of troublesome for polar bears. Protein digestion creates waste products like urea or uric acid, which the body needs to dilute to make safe. Despite all of the ice around, there's actually not that much drinkable water available to the bears, so if they eat too much protein, they can poison themselves. That's why if you look really closely at a nature documentary, you'll see that polar bears munching on seals aren't actually eating that much of the meat. They're going for the blubber because it contains a lot of fat and fluid. Polar bear milk is also a little more sour at first because it contains more nutrients, immune cells, and antibodies, which